Welcome to KidMin Backstage, the place where we talk about kids ministry and take a peek behind the scenes. We try to share a little bit of what we've learned that works for us and some of our failures so you can avoid them. We release a new episode every Friday, and this is your Backstage Pass to see the magic or the disaster that happens behind the scenes of our kids ministry. I'm your host, Gabe Baker, and today I am joined by Brother Matthew Critcher.
Hey, man, I'm so glad to be on today.
Yeah, so I just had your brother on.
Okay,
I guess
I didn't know that, but there we go.
A couple weeks ago, yeah.
That's cool.
Got him before he had to take off. So
that's awesome.
Cool. We talked about Fresh Start.
Okay, man, I need to watch it.
Yeah. So, so here we are. What are we talking about today?
We're going to be talking about quitting.
Quitting. So
I really like the title. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, dichotomy there.
Very catchy.
I didn't memorize the opening on this one, so I'm going to have to reference the notes a little bit. But in a world where quiet quitting has become trendy, and then almost the commitment seems optional, we face a growing challenge in ministry, that the normalization of giving up. And so this mindset, I'm afraid that this mindset has creeped into churches. And, our church, other churches, I hear different things. And so this affects everything from volunteer retention to spiritual growth, everything in between. So as leaders, especially in the church, in the apostolic church, we need to create a counterculture.
Absolutely.
This is a culture across, certainly in the secular world, I see it nonstop in the workplace.
Yeah.
And so we need to celebrate, perseverance, commitment, faithful endurance. And so then I just kind of put a note there about, remember Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. He wanted it. He wanted to quit. And he said, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think just kind of in this, to combat this culture of quitting, I'm kind of thinking of it from a couple different angles. One is, if you're trying to do something, we're still in January, and so if you're trying to do something and create a habit or something, and you seem to hit a brick wall, maybe give it another shot or come at it from a different angle.
Yeah.
So that's one way of looking at this. But the other way, and this is kind of what I'm talking about creeping into churches, is not just on a personal level, but on a ministry level, of saying, oh, you know what, I've been, an usher. I've been an usher for 5 years, and you know what, I'm going to quit. I'm just tired of doing that. Fighting that culture. Of just like, I think I'll quit doing, outreach.
Absolutely.
I'll quit doing whatever.
Yeah. That's the deal. Is it really does seem like like you said, there is that culture. When I got the opportunity more recently to preach in our church, that was something I brought up. Just something I was thinking about is the commitment level is so it's so like you said, it's that culture where it's becoming popular to not have commitment, and people they won't admit and say, yeah, I don't have commitment, but their view of commitment is so flawed. It's like, I'm committed until something doesn't go right.
Yeah.
And it's completely defies what commitment's all about.
Exactly.
Commitment is the commitment is it about, when everything's going good. Because it's easy to keep doing what's, right and what's good,
exactly.
when everything's going positive. But the commitment comes in when you're facing some resistance, when you're, facing opposition. And that's where too much of the time in ministry or something is where you start feeling tired. You maybe not even seeing results right away or something.
So you
and
can't
feel
ride that wave.
Yeah. And you feel like, man, I'm just going to give up. But, I was thinking when I was looking at kind of the notes you had sent me and stuff, just of what we were talking about. I was thinking about the Bible and how it, talks about, let us not be weary in well-doing.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
And then it says why? Because in due season we are going to reap if we faint not.
If we faint not.
If we do not quit. You think about that farmer, he's out there, he may not see the growth right away.
Yep.
But he just keeps doing it.
And,
expecting there's going to be results. But if he quits, then, I mean, there's no results.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I think that sometimes I believe that a lot of the quitting does come from, sometimes it's like a lack of the gratification, like the instant gratification, right? It's a lot easier to be like, yeah, let's go, when you do this thing and then you get a bunch of accolades.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's a lot easier than just doing something, cleaning toilets over and over and over again. You don't get all those accolades and everything. So
I mean, it is such a powerful topic, and I mean, it's funny because we were talking about this beforehand, before we started the recording, and you were asking me, like, you got a bunch of stuff to talk about, and at first I'm just like, I mean, I have some things, but not a lot. But now my brain is really spinning, like I said it does. But I mean, I think about people, and once again referring to the Bible. There's so many stories where it's like, if that person quit right before their breakthrough, right before they had their prayer answered, right before these needs, and referring back to what I had touched on in that message, I titled it "Until I Prevail," talking about Jacob. Here he is wrestling the angel, and the angel tells him, he says, because you have prevailed, you have overcome, you didn't quit,
you pushed.
And then another example would be like Cornelius. Imagine if Cornelius just like, hey, I'm not seeing results, and he quit just a day before praying. That angel came over. Man. I mean, that would have been, I mean, so many examples, but I feel like people quit too much of the time right before something good happens in their life.
Yeah, exactly.
Results.
And I think sometimes we don't maybe realize the impact that we are having too. And so it's not just our own breakthrough, but it's like we are making a difference. Yeah. And because we don't get an attaboy or a pat on the shoulder, we're just like, I'm going to quit this. I'm not needed anyway. Nobody notices if I show up or not. And they do.
Absolutely. You stop doing it, and it's noticed. You notice. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we have some notes here. Number one is recognize the signs of quitting culture. And so this is kind of talking about that whole workplace thing, I guess, a little bit, is sometimes it's disguised. This quitting culture is disguised as like this wisdom of self-care and balance and boundaries. And while all of those are necessary, I think that most of us aren't anywhere close to the edge of that, where we need more balance. As far as, we might need more balance, but as far as doing the work of God, I mean, I think of, so in my work, I do a lot of meetings and things, and so my calendar is quite full. Yeah. And so when somebody from our church works in the state, and they were able to see my calendar one time, and they're just like, oh my goodness, it was all blocked out. But I remember I had a boss, it's not my boss anymore, but I had a boss, and their calendar, it was all color coordinated too, but you'd look at it and it was literally like all day long. It was like 15 to 30 minute increments, and it was like no openings. I mean, you had to schedule to get like 15 minutes with him. You had to schedule like a week in advance at least. Yeah. And so I think on that level, and then you think of the president, it's like, okay, you can have 2 minutes here, or whatever. So I think that, and of course, some of these are high level, but when you think about that level of commitment and busyness, surely we could at least devote some of that level, or something towards that level to the kingdom of God. Absolutely. The highest calling. Yeah. And so that's one of the things I think about, recognizing that quitting culture in ourselves, maybe in our ministry, if we're leading a team, and we are talking about, ultimately this is a Sunday school or a KidMin podcast. So in your team, recognizing that, and there's only so much you can push with people, but if we can first recognize it in ourselves, is like, okay, I'm saying that I'm doing this because I want more balance, or I need more time with my family, or I need more balance in my life. And are you really doing too much for the church, or is there some other things that you can cut?
Yeah, absolutely. Recognizing that's important. I think, too, what can really help is speaking with someone like your pastor about it, or someone in authority that you feel like can give you an honest opinion about it.
Yes.
To say, hey, is this actually, am I actually trying to balance here, or is it just, my, if I put it this way, the human desires of me that just wants to, back down from this. It doesn't want to consecrate as much.
Yeah.
And sometimes having that other person look at it and give you advice of, hey,
from kind of an objective.
Yeah, absolutely.
standpoint.
Be to see that whether that counsel or not that culture of quitting is creeping in.
I am not a woman, and never will be.
Praise the
Lord. And so I'm going to tread very carefully here, but I have seen it where I've seen it both ways. So that's why I think I can speak to this. Is I've seen it where a lady in the church has a baby for the first time, and they quit a bunch of things, and naturally, because they just had a baby, and so they're going to spend time with their baby. But then what I have seen is they never, ever come back. I mean, here their kid is 12 years old, and they're still not involved in anything. Now, I've also seen it the other way around, and we have somebody that helps in youth right now that's this way. They had a baby, and 2 weeks later, they were at youth night helping out.
Wow.
And so, and again, I'm treading carefully. I know that there's all kinds of different variables there. But I think that you do have to be careful, because it's kind of like when you miss church. I mean, you and I are not in this position. Not that we've never missed church, but I'm saying if somebody is maybe on the fringes of something and they miss church, it's a lot easier to miss next time, and then easier and easier, right? It snowballs. And so I think the same thing. If I were to quit, we do Sunday school practice at 8:30 in the morning on Sundays. Yeah. If I were to quit that all of a sudden, and I could sleep in and I don't have to be here till whenever, it could be like, hey, this is kind of nice. Yeah. And then it could be like, oh, well, maybe I should quit this, or maybe I should, and so I think that can snowball as well.
Absolutely. In the other areas of your life. Yeah. And I mean, here's an aspect of it too, is that, we talk about that quitting culture, all that, but it can be contagious. Someone sees you quit, and all of a sudden it's like, well, hey, they quit. I mean, that kind of gives me a reason to, drop out of this. If they, they were busy in that, but they felt like they didn't really, they stopped doing that. So I don't really see why I need to be doing this as well. Yeah.
Yep, it can be contagious, and it goes both ways. And this might be something we're going to talk about. I can't remember, but it can go both ways. You can be contagious when you quit stuff, but you can be contagious if you're on fire.
Very true.
And,
very true.
Like, what I like to think of it is, if we could make, there's some onus on us as leaders. If we can make Sunday school, the ministry part of it, not. We talk about all the time making it not boring for kids and all that. But on the ministry staff side, if we could make it something that is so cool that everybody wants to have a piece. They want to be a part, because it's just like, oh, man, I want to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
And so there is some, I think, ownership that we as leaders have to take on that. In this, I really don't feel like when people quit, it's the leader's fault per se. Not saying that at all, but I do think we can, as leaders, try to have that mindset a little bit of like, let's make this to where people don't want to quit.
Yes, that's very true. Very true.
So number 2 I have is reframe difficulties as growth opportunities, and this is like, what's the no pain, no gain?
Yeah.
So if we can reframe and this is again speaking to kind of ourselves, if we can reframe things as like, okay, if something is, if we're pushing the boundaries and we're pushing the limits of what we know how to do, we're getting out of our comfort zone. It's not comfortable and it is difficult.
Yes, it is.
But that's usually the point of a breakthrough. Kind of like what you talk about, people quit right before they're at the breakthrough. Well, sometimes there's signs there that should let us know, we've been doing this for a long time. We're pushing, we just feel like we're not getting anywhere. And then things get harder. That should almost be a sign for us to like, oh, I'm almost there.
We're getting there.
Yeah, I'm almost to that breakthrough. Because, we can, so often we can look at difficulty. I remember talking to Pastor about this one time about like a lot of people are like, they run into difficulty maybe once, twice, 3 times. And like, well, it must not have been God's will. And really, if you look at biblical examples and just life examples, really, we probably, as a general rule, should have the other mindset.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
true.
having a lot of difficulty. This must be God's will.
Yeah. Hey, that's good. That's very good.
It's kind of like the person that gets a flat tire on the way to church. Like, man, it's going to be a good service tonight. Versus the person like, well, it must not be God's will for me to go to church.
Yeah. It reminds me of actually this morning. It was my first day of being able to work on our bus department. So it was really exciting.
Oh, yeah.
Really cool. I'm so glad I got to be a part of that today. And so our bus captain, she calls me and lets me know her car stopped working this morning. And she's panicking. It's making all this weird noises and stuff, and then it dies. And so then she reaches out to the bus driver, and the bus driver lets her know, is getting ready to leave, and kind of find out her car isn't turning on, isn't starting.
Oh, my.
And we're like, oh, man. So eventually we were able to get some rides worked out to where we could even meet at the church, and get on the bus.
And get a bus for the bus ministry.
And we're, we're just kind of joking, but, we're on the bus. We're thinking, man, it's going to be good, man.
Yeah. Oh, man.
There's a little bit of resistance, keeping us from going. And we had a good turnout, we had a good amount of kids. And so it just reminded me, it's a funny story of just,
yes.
Not giving up. You just find a way to make it work, so.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing is I do think of that is if we can change our perspective. And the thing is when you change your perspective, it changes how easy or hard it is sometimes.
Yeah.
I remember reading a long time ago, I believe it was John Maxwell, but I remember reading something along these lines. And almost every task that I'm about to do, I had to change a bumper on my car. I had got a car that's new to me and had a messed up bumper. So I changed the bumper on it. And I'm not a mechanic at all or any of that kind of stuff, but I did it myself. And so things like that, I keep this in mind. What I read was that the reason we get so frustrated when things go wrong is we expected them to go perfectly right. So if we can go into a task expecting it to go wrong, not being a pessimist, but just knowing that invariably things are going to go wrong. I'm going to be missing a tool or a part. Things aren't going to go right. And then when it does, bonus, that's great. Nobody's going to get mad about that.
Yeah.
And so, that bumper, I was expecting, especially because I don't do this all the time, I was expecting okay, I'm going to probably have to run to the auto parts store and find some bolt or something, or I might even have to go get a tool I don't have.
Yeah. And
so I was just kind of expecting that it would not go well. It ended up going really well. I didn't have to go get anything and ran into hardly any issues. But I think that, if we are expecting, conflict, or we're expecting that it's not going to go perfectly, then when it doesn't go perfectly, we're not all out of sorts.
Yeah.
We're not all been out of shape. We're like, well, this was expected.
Yeah.
We knew this wasn't going to go perfect. And so the same thing, like the bus, so you were just talking about, you might not be expecting to have broken down cars every morning, but that there's going to be rowdy kids.
Yeah.
That some kids that said they're going to come aren't going to show up.
Yes.
you know that some days, because of the nature of bus ministry, you're going to have 2 kids on the bus. Another time you might have, 32 kids, whatever. But so you know that going into it.
Yeah.
So it's okay to have feelings. I'm not saying we're robots, but to know, like, this is expected.
Yeah.
I knew that this would happen.
Yeah.
And instead of just, forget this.
Yeah. Something else that comes to mind is the very familiar story of the woman with the issue of blood. She's pursuing Jesus, and she knows that he has the ability to heal her.
Yes.
And as she's making her way there, she's having to push through the crowd. And I kind of view it with what we're talking about. She sees the difficulty. She sees the opposition. She sees the crowd. In a sense, it's more of a confirming sign to her that, hey, these people are coming after him because he does have the ability to heal.
Yes.
She could look at it as, man, there's no way I'm getting there. There's just too much opposition in the way. I'm just going to quit. It's not worth it. But it's almost like it was an encouragement to her, like, hey, these people are coming to him for a reason.
Yeah, for a reason.
This resistance is here for a reason. I'm going to try to push and make sure I get to him.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. And to lead into our next point, number 3 is to champion long-term commitment. She had that for 12 years.
Yes.
She had that. And so
it's incredible.
Now, I'm not saying that she had a commitment for 12 years, but she had the disease for 12 years, and it just seemed like a good segue. But so if we could champion long-term commitment, and I think on the notes there I have in an instant gratification world, we need to recapture the beauty of long-term commitment. And so I think Dave Ramsey talks about the microwave versus the crock pot, and I can't remember his example, but you think about it, I use a microwave all the time, but a microwave meal typically has nothing on a crock pot meal, or my dad the other night was on the smoker making ribs or whatever, and it takes hours and hours. And so those long-term things, they do pay off. And I talk about this all the time, so people probably get sick of hearing it, but I talk about this is what we do.
Yeah.
It's just what we do. It's not about, okay, I did this and 50 new kids came to Sunday school. Woohoo!
Yeah.
It's not about that. That's great when that happens. But if no new kids come to Sunday school today, this is still what I do.
Yes.
Day in, day out. This is who I am. This is how I operate. This is what I do.
Yeah.
It's not about the gratification. It's not about the attaboy. Those are nice, and as leaders, we do need to give those. But it's not about doing it for that. I talk about all the time David and Goliath. David, before anybody knew his name, he was day in, day out singing praises to God, praying to God, had a relationship with God. And then he got his spotlight moment. Too often today, I think that we're looking for those spotlight moments.
Yeah.
We want the spotlight without all the work that it takes to get there, but also we just are seeking out the spotlight.
Yes.
Instead of seeking out just what God sees. God sees me every day doing this.
Yeah.
This is the work that I do.
Yeah. People when they, and I don't want this to turn at all negative with what I'm about to say, but when people pass away, it's not the spotlight moments per se that they're remembered for. It's very rare that those are the things that's, hey, I just remember that one moment with that person,
Right.
that just, that where they were out there just, in the spotlight, whatever. But what it was, it's in a sense, it's that long-term who they were as a person, what they did on a consistent basis.
What they were characterized by.
Absolutely. And that's what people would remember that made an impact in their life. And I think of an individual in our church who had passed away a couple of years ago. He did a lot of the just the housekeeping stuff here at the church.
Yes.
He didn't have those spotlight moments, but he was committed. He was committed that until the day I die, I'm going to be doing this.
Yeah.
You're going to see me, if you come into the church, there's a good chance you're going to see me doing work. And I'm not doing it to be seen.
He was always here. Yeah.
And that's what stood out to me a lot about him and made an impact in me, is just like, hey, he was consistent. He didn't have to be seen by people. It was just who he was. He was just doing what he needed to do.
Yeah.
And ultimately, he just wanted to please God. And that's what he was remembered for.
Yeah,
exactly. That long term.
Yep. Yeah, long term, that consistency. This is who I am. This is what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if we can get that mindset where it's not about just the spotlight, or you know, you and I both are on stage or on the platform sometimes, and that's great. Those times are great, but it's really not about that.
No.
Those are little blips in what we do. It's kind of like, I love vacation. I like going on vacation and everything. I could use one right now. I hate the weather right now. I could go somewhere sunny for all you that are in sunny places. But really, I love my life. Yeah. There's things that could be better or whatever, but I love the day in, day out, what I do. Yeah. You know, that's who I am.
Absolutely.
Okay, the final one is the art of persistence. So number 4 is the art of persistence. So this is like a muscle. It's a skill that could be developed. You know, creating the art of persistence, knowing that, okay, I'm going to push through. I think that, like what you said about contagious, I think is also just within ourself is almost a, not contagious. I guess I used the word snowball effect earlier, but kind of like that, or our culture within ourself is we can get used to quitting. Yeah. And so if we quit, okay, I've used this example before, but the person that has a natural talent, let's say in music, they are really naturally talented, and we just talked about this not too long ago, so I apologize for repeating, but they will often, they're so talented, and or if they're talented and they don't really practice, okay, there's talented people that do. Adrian is one, but they're talented and they don't practice because they can just get away with it. They can get away with it because they're so talented. Well, they will only reach a certain level, and they'll hit a lid because their talent will take them to a certain level, and they're not used to working hard at it. Yeah. So when they reach that lid, that point, that's as far as they go. Versus the person that maybe is not as talented, but they work so hard. Yes. And they're just used to always having to work hard. The heights for them is just, it's limitless, you know? Yeah. And so if we can have kind of that mindset, and we can build that persistence as a skill, as we just say, this is who I am. I will persist. I will push. And that's what I do every time. Some things are easier, some things are hard, but we just always know that we just push. Yeah. And that's what we do. Yeah. And the more you do it, of course there's going to be difficult days and difficult times, but the more you do it, it does develop that muscle, and it starts to get easier. Yeah. You start to notice you have a little bit more strength. Yes. And it's like, hey, you know what? I can actually take this a little further. Imagine the person that's, exercising or bodybuilding, whatever it is. And, for a long time, they're just consistent at that one. Let's say they're bench pressing or something. They're used to that one weight, and they're just consistent at it. All of a sudden, a couple, months down the road, it's like, hey, you know what? That's not as hard as it was when I first was going, because I was consistent. Now I can up it up a little bit, and now there's a greater strength that I have. I've developed a greater muscle in this, and that's the same thing with being persistent. Is you just keep working at it, and it will eventually, with time, get easier to where you can even become greater, and Well, and to stick with that analogy, is then you go on to a different exercise. Yeah. And because you've developed this habit of not only developing that muscle, but the mindset of, I'm going to push through it and get to where I'm good at this. Now the next new exercise is easier. Yeah. I was just telling somebody the other day, we were talking about the website, our church website. So let me back up. When I started this podcast, I am somewhat of a tech guy. I use computers every day, both Mac and PC, and I do a lot of power user type stuff. Yeah. So I'm somewhat of a tech guy, but I'm not a coder or anything like that. When I started this podcast, for some reason, I just had major issues trying to get, there's a few things that I was trying to get set up, and it was so hard, so difficult. And, but I got through it and I got it done. So that's an example, of pushing through, persevering, and finally got it launched, got it off the ground. Well, then I was talking about our website, and I was saying that with some of the things I had to do some coding, and the person I was talking to, they were like, I didn't know you could code. I was like, well, I can't, but I had to figure out how to do something. So I Googled it and I had to do some coding. And so it was one of those things of like, it's not that I'm smart or super cool or anything. It's just that I was trying to get a task done.
It's good.
And I have learned, like, you got to push through things and figure stuff out, because if you try to give it to somebody else, they're not going to do it, or you're going to pay somebody and they're going to do it, and they're going to do the same thing that I could do. And
you gained experience and knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. And now it's going to be easier next time.
Absolutely.
Okay, we are getting very close to our end time. So, and I'm losing my voice. There we go. So let's do a quick recap. There we go. Got to get a little bit in my throat and lose my voice. So recognize the signs of quitting culture. And again, sometimes that's disguised in like, oh, I'm going to be balanced. And I remember hearing an Odyssey one time, and I love Adventures in Odyssey, but I remember hearing it, and it was something along the lines of like, you're just doing too much. And I didn't like it. I do know that there's value in that. There is, and there's probably messages preached about it. But I tend to think we have more of a culture that's the other way.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, it's far and few between that you find somebody like, okay, you need to slow down a little bit. It's far. Who's Obed Edom, right? Is it Obed Edom that volunteered for everything?
Everything.
Yeah, so go look him up. Our pastor preached an awesome message about that years ago. And then Brother Bo preached one like a year later, the same exact message at a conference. Yeah, Obed Edom, he volunteered for everything. I mean, he was cleaning the toilets, singing on the platform. He was doing everything.
Oh, yeah.
So number 2 is reframe difficulties as growth opportunities. Change your mindset. Change your perspective.
Put some different glasses on.
Yes, put some different glasses on. And then champion long-term commitment. Long-term commitments, and I don't want to scare anybody off, like, from Sunday school, like, okay, you're going to do Sunday school, this is the rest of your life. It's not about that necessarily, but just, what happened to forget about the spotlight, and I'm going to give my best. I'm going to do this. This is it's a work of God.
Yeah.
It's kingdom work.
Absolutely.
And then number 4, the art of persistence, just learning how to push through that, developing that muscle.
Absolutely. So good.
All right. Well, I think that's a wrap.
All right.